My father's name was Richard Hale, Navy veteran, caretaker of broken lawnmowers and neighbor secrets. He ironed his church shirts on Sunday nights and kept a blue folder in the bottom desk drawer labeled in block letters, Survivor Benefits. After his funeral, the folder came home with me in a reusable grocery bag. The bag also held his watch, a handful of screws, and a tiny spiral notebook with oil stains on the corners. The watch still ticked. The screws pressed a pattern into my palm. I set the bag on my kitchen table and stood there longer than I should have. I am Anna, 46, oldest daughter, married, 2 kids in college. I live 20 miles from my mother, who remarried 3 years after Dad's bypass. His name is Gordon, my stepfather. He used to bring citronella candles to backyard dinners. He used to call me kiddo, which I tolerated because Dad was alive then and I didn't need the word daughter from any other mouth. On a Monday rainy night, I fell asleep in sweatpants on the sofa with the dog at my feet and the news droning low. At 2:08 a.m., my phone buzzed, then buzzed again. Fraud alert. Unusual withdrawal attempt, survivor benefits, U.S. Treasury linked. A third buzz. Please confirm. The dog lifted his head. I sat up. The room was a great cube. I tapped, "No, this is not me," and my chest went hollow, as if air had scooped a bowl inside my ribs. I called the number on the alert and gave my date of birth. The man said, calm as a clock, that a card had been presented at a First Harbor branch on York Road. He read a timestamp. I wrote it on a receipt. 2:01 a.m., which made no sense because branches don't open at 2:01 a.m. He clarified. The system reflected an attempted authorization through the night deposit interface tied to the account. I didn't know banks could do that. He said sometimes they do, through a companion card or ID verification at the vestibule terminal. My hand shook. Freeze it, I said, temporarily. He read a script while I stared at the blue folder on my counter. Your signal has been received, he said at the end. The phrase was too precise. It pinned me to this second. I called my mother. The ringtone felt rude at that hour. She answered breathless. Anna? I could hear the television in her room and Gordon coughing. I asked if she or anyone had tried to withdraw from the Survivor account. Why would we? She said, soft and tired. She didn't know. She handed the phone to Gordon. He said he had, actually. He said they needed cash for immediate expenses related to final paperwork and headstone deposit. He said Mom had given him the word. He said it was just clothes, meaning money, I suppose, and not a body. People say that about burial suits. It's just clothes, they say, as if fabric were the only thing surrounding a life. I asked for paperwork authorizing him to touch that account. He used the phrase verbal permission. I used the word no. He said, don't be dramatic. I said, put my mother back on. Her voice tried to float above it, like a handkerchief over a small flame. Go back to sleep, honey, she said. We'll talk in the morning. We did not sleep. At 6, I drove over. The rain had thinned to a stubborn mist. In the kitchen, my mother had set out 2 coffee cups and a plate of quartered muffins. She wore Dad's flannel robe. It drowned her wrists. I could smell lemon cleaner. The blue folder waited in my tote. Gordon sat with his phone face down. He said we have to be practical. He said bills are bills. I opened the folder. DD-214, letters from the VA, notice of eligibility. The designation of beneficiary named my mother. Not me, not Gordon. I slid the page across the table and tapped the line with my finger. He looked at it the way a fox looks at a porch light. My brother joined us by video call. He works oil. He was between shifts. His face appeared grainy from a motel lamp. He said what middle children often say. Can we not burn the house down at sunrise? My sister-in-law leaned into the frame and suggested a family plan, which is what people suggest when words like policy and law have been spoken. I set the terms. We would not move a dime until we had a written plan, signatures, and the VA counselor's blessing. We would cover small immediate expenses by check and keep receipts. No cash pulls, no verbal permissions. Your father would, my mother began, and then stopped because the sentence had too many doors to open. Gordon watched me, chin tucked, mouth thin. He said, we're not criminals. I said nothing. I photographed the page and the page after that. The camera sound was a nail in softwood. He flinched. "Anna," my mother said, but there was relief in the syllables. Someone had finally set a rule. We cleaned the muffins off the table and laid out pens like we were in a church basement signing up for choir. At 10, I drove to the nearest base legal office, the JAG building off Lakeshore, where men and women in sober uniforms sit with ordinary families and their heaps of paper. I wore black jeans and Dad's old field jacket because I still had not washed it. The waiting room smelled like coffee and wet coats. On the far wall, a framed poster reminded us to bring originals and to breathe. A captain named Patel called my name. We sat in a small room that felt like a borrowed office. He asked for the sequence. I handed over the blue folder and the timeline I'd scrawled on a diner receipt. He listened the way my father used to listen to a loose engine, patient, head tilted, one hand on a pen, but he didn't write much. He explained survivor benefits in simple, patient sentences. He drew a small box for my mother's legal authority. He drew an arrow to the bank and another to the VA. He wrote the words, "No POA on file for Gordon," after he confirmed with my mother on speaker. He talked me through protective measures. He used phrases like safeguard, document chain, custodial account. He said a subpoena to the bank for the vestibule camera might be appropriate if the bank resisted cooperation. "We prefer to ask first," he said, "but we are not shy about asking formally." He looked up. "How urgent is the family dynamic?" "Hot," I said, but polite. He nodded. We called the bank from his office. A compliance manager named Fletcher took the call. He said they had flagged the transaction attempt and placed a temporary hold. He said they would need to see a POA or a court order to discuss account specifics with any non-beneficiary. He noted that someone had presented a card and answered 2 identity questions incorrectly. The system had refused. He used the word vestibule again. I pictured Gordon in that bright little box where the ATM hums all night, 3 feet from a camera that never blinks, holding my mother's card like a visitor holds a borrowed coat. "Your signal has been received," Captain Patel said when he ended the call, echoing the bank script by accident. He smiled. "I mean, thank you for bringing this in quickly. That matters." We prepared a short letter for my mother to sign, a formal notice that only she and I, as her named helper for calls, were authorized to speak. My mother drove over with her robe thrown over jeans, hair in a clip. She signed with slow care, then laid her palm over the signature as if it were a bird. We scheduled a meeting of record at the bank for Wednesday afternoon. The captain would attend. The bank would bring their compliance officer. Gordon would be invited. My brother would join by video call. We would watch the clip. We would look at the log. We would write the plan. The rest of Monday stretched like taffy. I drove my mother home and made her an omelet she barely touched. Gordon wasn't around. She said he had a dentist appointment. I told her we had a plan now. "A plan is a railing," I said. "You can hold it and not fall down." She smiled without showing teeth, which is how she smiles when she's trying to be small in a room. I cleaned the counter. I left the blue folder on top of the microwave, the way Dad used to leave instructions where the light hit them. Tuesday morning, I woke to a text from my brother. "Keep it on paper, sis, no side deals." Then a second text I didn't expect. "Proud of you." I put my phone face down and cried into my coffee like a person in a commercial pretending not to. At noon, my sister-in-law called and suggested we rotate expenses from the survivor account for family fairness. I asked what fairness meant when the beneficiary was our mother and the money existed for her care. She said fairness meant our households had all carried stress. I reminded her that stress is not a billable code. I stayed polite. 40-plus audiences don't need speeches from me, and neither does my family. I said we would bring every receipt to the table, and the math would tell us who needed what. She sighed loudly. "You always were the hall monitor." "Good," I said. "Halls need monitoring." At 3, Gordon appeared at my mother's door with a manila envelope and a practiced expression. He called me kiddo again. I let it pass through me like a draft through a torn screen. He said the headstone vendor needed cash to secure a slot before Memorial Day. My mother turned to me. She wanted the stone. She wanted the date carved on something harder than a death certificate. I called the vendor on speaker. The vendor said a check was fine. The vendor said no one had asked for cash. The vendor said, "We prefer checks, actually." The quiet that followed slid along the kitchen tiles and curled up under the table like a cat. Gordon adjusted his belt. He said something about miscommunication. My mother stared at the salt shaker. "It's just clothes," he added, as if burying or paying or moving money were all the same. They were fabric you fold and hide in drawers. I picked up Dad's flannel robe at the chair and draped it over the back, a small, ordinary gesture that felt like placing a flag. That night, my mother called after she thought I was asleep. Her whisper was a fragile line, a kite string over a dark field. "I do not want a fight," she said. "I want the stone. I want my checkbook. I do not want to be treated like a child." I told her the meeting tomorrow would not be a fight. It would be the sound of adult chairs scooting toward a table where numbers do not lie and video does not blink. "Your signal has been received," I said, and we both heard the oddness of the phrase in a daughter's voice. She laughed. We needed that. Wednesday came bright and unflattering, the kind of sun that shows every streak on a glass door. The bank's lobby smelled like lemon and clean carpet. We checked in. A young teller's nameplate read Natalie. She had the mascara of someone who has been brave for a long time at $10 above minimum wage. She guided us to a conference room with a glass wall and a too large fern. Captain Patel arrived in a crisp uniform that somehow made the room kinder. The compliance manager, Fletcher, shook hands in the careful way of men who have learned to hold their own wrists. Gordon arrived late, carrying the manila envelope. He wore a tie he did not often wear. He did not meet my eye. My brother's face flickered to life on the wall screen. He looked like a hostage in a motel, which, in a way, he was. Natalie set a small plastic pitcher of water in the center of the table, and the sound it made was a soft knock, like someone gently asking to come into a life. I opened the blue folder and arranged the pages with the same old habit I learned helping Dad sort bolts by size, small to large, shining to dull, what fits with what. Fletcher began. He stated the purpose. He said the meeting would be recorded by the bank for the file. He read the time. He read the names of the people present. He asked my mother to confirm her identity. She did. He asked Gordon to confirm his. He did. Fletcher turned to the monitor and asked Natalie to pull up the vestibule clip flagged by fraud at 2:01 a.m. on Monday. Natalie clicked through a menu, and the room filled with the low hush of hard drives and the breath we did not realize we were holding. The image came up. A small vestibule at night, bright, clinical. The glass door reflecting the street lamp. A man stepped in, hood of the rain jacket down. He shook rainwater from his sleeves. He looked up and around with the quick, guilty scan of someone who has watched too much TV about crimes that are not his, but feel nearby. He pulled a card from his wallet. He held it in 2 fingers like a business card at a networking event. He stepped to the terminal, which glowed a tender, indifferent blue. "Please note the timestamp, upper right," Fletcher said. The numbers were neat. The numbers were a row of fence posts in a field. He inserted the card. He bent close and answered something into the speaker. The system waited, thinking its slow, coded thoughts, long seconds. He tried again. A red frame flashed. He took a breath that lifted his shoulders, then tried a 3rd time. Red again. He swore, though we could not hear him. The vestibule had no microphone. He looked back at the door. He hesitated. He held the card up to the light and tilted it, as if the foil might whisper mercy. Then finally, he handed the card to the camera with a small, involuntary gesture, like a person giving up a name. "Zoom," Fletcher said, gentle. The screen tightened. The rectangle of plastic filled the upper left of the image. The name on the card was my mother's. The room went still. I could hear the small fan in the projector. I could hear the ice settling in the pitcher. My brother's exhale came through the speakers like wind on a flag. My mother pressed her hand to her chest. Her fingers found the edge of her blouse like a seam on a map. Gordon shifted. The envelope made a dry, papery cough against his thigh. Fletcher lowered the clip and slid a printed log across the table. He explained, almost kindly, that the system had prompted 2 identity questions. The answers given did not match. The system declined. The attempted withdrawal did not complete. A temporary hold had then been placed. He turned to my mother. "Mrs. Hale," he said, "we apologize for any distress." He looked at me. "We appreciate the speed of your report. It helped." Captain Patel leaned forward. He spoke in a plain voice designed for rooms where panic wants to take the front chair. He recapped beneficiary status. He recapped that no power of attorney naming Gordon existed. He recapped that any movement of funds required my mother's signed authorization and, depending on the action, the VA's confirmation or proper bank forms. He asked if anyone disputed those basics. No one did. He asked if anyone had a written authorization for Monday's attempt. No one did. Gordon touched the envelope. "We needed cash for the stone," he said. "She told me to handle it. We were grieving. You can't expect—" He stopped. My mother sat taller. Something in her spine found a memory of its own dignity, a muscle that had been asleep. "I did not authorize a cash withdrawal," she said slowly. "I did not authorize the vestibule at night. I did not authorize my card in anyone else's hand." The sentences landed like small, careful bricks, building a short wall around her in the brightest way. "It's just clothes," he said again, aiming for the old, easy minimization. I turned the phrase over like a stone and set it back on the table in a new light. "No," I said, "it is not just clothes. It is proof of service. It is medicine money. It is heating oil. It is the last gift of a man who ironed shirts on Sunday and never once asked for applause. It is not a shirt you throw away." Fletcher cleared his throat. "Given what we've reviewed," he said, "we will maintain the hold, restrict access to authorized parties only, and note the attempted access as unauthorized. We will also place a caution on the card and reissue a new one for Mrs. Hale. We recommend a written family plan for disbursements, with the bank acting on signed instructions only." He looked at my mother. "We can help set that up today." My brother spoke through the screen. "Let's do it," he said. "Keep it boring, keep it legal." He looked tired in the good way, the way of man saving fuel for the long drive home. I slid a blank pad to my mother and uncapped a pen. The pen clicked. The sound was small and exact, like a latch on a gate. We wrote headings: medical, household, burial, emergencies. We wrote receipts required in a square box and drew a line to the phrase shared view, which made my sister-in-law sigh, but quieter this time. Natalie brought in a stack of bank forms and a duplicate folder with tabs. She smiled with the contained relief of someone who watches rooms for storms. "Almost there," she said. Gordon shifted again. He opened the envelope. He pulled out a photocopy of something and pushed it across the table like a chess move he had rehearsed. "Power of attorney. Signed last month." The room waited. The page lay there. The edges curled a little, like toast. Captain Patel lifted it with 2 fingers. He did not hurry. He checked the notary block. He checked the witness lines. He checked the date. He checked the names. He set it down. "This is a general information release form for the oncology office. It allows you to pick up lab results." He slid the paper gently back toward Gordon. The pitch of the room changed, like the air above a road when the sun hits it. My mother's shoulders lowered. She reached for the pitcher. I poured water before she could stand. The cup was light, her hand shook, and the cold kissed her wrist bone. I thought of the watch in my kitchen. I thought of how my father always set it 5 minutes fast, so he would know. At home, I set Dad's watch on the counter and wound it. The tick was steady. The dog's nails tapped the tile in lazy measures. I opened the blue folder and added today's notes. I wrote the time like Fletcher had. I wrote the names. I wrote the phrase, "not just clothes," because I wanted to remember the moment the room agreed. I wrote another phrase under it in smaller letters. "Dignity is paid in receipts." The house went quiet. Not empty, just quiet. I set an alarm for Thursday morning to drive Mom to the headstone office. We would bring a check. We would choose granite that would hold its color in rain. We would pick a font that looked like the truth. We would say his name out loud in a lobby that smelled like fresh paper. We would not hurry. The phone rang. It was my sister-in-law again, asking whether the family plan meant she needed to send me receipts for the casserole dishes she had dropped off when Dad was in the hospital. I said, no. I said, this plan is for the survivor account, for Mom's care. I said, food is kindness, not accounting. She softened. I just didn't want to be left out, she said. You're not, I said. You're just not in charge. She laughed, short and surprised, the sound people make when a knot loosens and they didn't know it was there. I went to bed early, for the first time in a week. Before I turned off the lamp, I wrote one more sentence on an index card and tucked it under the blue folder band. If you make the table clear enough, even the people who don't want to sit down can see what's on it. I breathed. I slept. Morning brought a voicemail. Gordon. He said he was sorry if it looked bad. He said he had meant well. He said the envelope still held some proof he wanted me to see. He asked if he could drop by. I stared at the phone and then at the dog, whose eyes said what dogs always say, decide and then stand by it. I texted him instead. Put anything you want considered in writing, email only, no drop-bys. He replied with one word, fine. By noon, an email came. 3 attachments. A scan of the general information form, again, a photograph of a handwritten note my mother had left him on the kitchen counter 2 weeks earlier, please handle the cable bill, and a blurry photo of the headstone vendor's business card. In the subject line, he wrote, authorization. I breathed. I forwarded the email to the captain and to the bank compliance address on the card Fletcher had given me. I wrote, for the record. I wrote, your signal has been received. At 2, my mother called. She said, he's sulking, with the weary affection of a person who still tries to place pillows under sharp corners. But he's quiet. Quiet is a beginning. Quiet is space where truth dries after being washed. Tomorrow, I said, we choose the stone. She exhaled. And I'll write the first check, she said, from my account, because it is my account. The words were small and precise. They felt like a woman trying on a coat that is, in fact, hers. I told her I would pick her up at 9. I set my phone face down and cleaned the counter. The sponge passed over a dried coffee ring and erased it in one smooth circle. I thought of my father wiping his own counters, humming off-key. I thought of Gordon's hand in the bright vestibule, holding a card up to a camera that did not care about his feelings, only the numbers. I thought of the phrase, it's just clothes, and how we had, in an afternoon, tailored that sentence to fit the truth instead. Money is not clothes. Money is a plan. Plans deserve buttons and seams. Plans keep people warm. I went to the drawer where Dad kept the stray screws. I poured them into my palm. The metal was cool and clean. There were 3 sizes. I sorted them without thinking, small to large, until the pattern in my hand matched the pattern in my chest. I put them back. I closed the drawer. And when the house was still, I took out a notebook and wrote down what we would do next if Gordon tried again or if anyone else tested a lock. The list was short. Call the bank. Call the captain. Call my brother. Keep it on paper. Keep it boring. Keep it kind where possible and steal where necessary. We do not apologize for rails that save people from falling. The headstone office sat between a bakery and a tire shop. The door chime was a shy bell. Inside, the air held the smell of wet granite and printer paper. A fan turned slow enough to be seen. A woman in a gray cardigan greeted us and set samples on a felt mat. She had careful hands. She said, take your time. There's no wrong choice, only your choice. My mother touched each slab the way you'd test a window on a cold morning. She paused at a dark, almost blue stone. It held light without arguing. The clerk laid a stencil book on the table. She said, block. She tapped a line. Roman. Serif that reads clean in rain. My mother nodded. She said his name. It was the first time she had said it in a business voice since the service. The syllables steadied her. We chose a small anchor, Quiet, not cute. Because he was Navy, and because anchors hold. We picked a date format he would have liked, month spelled out in full, no abbreviations. We picked a line below the name and years. It was not a poem. It was not a boast. It was 4 words that he had written in block letters inside a few of his tool drawers. Leave it better here. The clerk typed. The keys clicked like sewing. When she finished, she slid the proof across the counter for review. She said, "Sign there. And here." My mother took out her checkbook. She wrote the full amount. No cash. The nib whispered. She handed over the check with a small exhale, as if a heavy bird had finally landed on a safe branch. The clerk stamped paid with a gentle thump. She said, "Your signal has been received," smiling at her own joke after the bank story we had told. We smiled with her. Words can heal when you take them out of the mouth of a system and put them back in a human voice. At home, we taped the proof on the fridge. We ate soup. It was too salty, but we ate it. The quiet in the house was no longer an accusation. It was a hallway. By late afternoon, the second challenge found us. Trouble is a good traveler. A letter sat in the mailbox in a white envelope with a window. The return address read, Senior Services Liaison County. Inside, a complaint form. Concern, daughter restricting access to funds. Reporter, anonymous. My mother's shoulders tightened. Gordon stood by the sink, arms folded. He did not say he wrote it. He did not need to. Anonymous letters wear familiar cologne. I called the number on the letter. A woman answered. She was brisk without being sharp. I gave the case number. I gave the facts. Beneficiary designation. Bank meeting. JAG involvement. Written plan. Receipts. She listened. She asked to speak to my mother. She asked simple questions. Do you have your own checkbook? Do you feel pressured to sign things? Do you want your daughter's help? My mother said yes, no, and yes. She cleared her throat and said she would close the file and would note the call. If anything changes, she added, call me directly. Your signal has been received, she almost said, but instead, my line is open. I put the letter on the cable, next to our plan. Sun slid across both pages and made them honest. Gordon drifted out. The door didn't slam. The quiet he left was shapeless, which is its own shape. My mother stared at the closed door. She said, he is not all bad. I said, he is not all good. He is a man under a bill and a habit. She nodded. We washed bowls. We did not make pronouncements. We made space. Thursday brought a call from the bank. Natalie. She said, documents ready for pickup. The restriction letter, the meeting summary, new card, also the fraud notice you requested for the file. Her voice warmed on the word file, as if organization were a kindness. And it is. I drove over with the blue folder and left with the blue folder heavier by 4 stamped pages and a small envelope that held a card with my mother's name embossed in clean, patient letters. On the way out, we stopped at the community bulletin board. A flyer hung there about a Saturday financial safety talk at the VFW hall for families of veterans, it said. Free. Coffee provided. We took the bottom tab. The paper tore with a sound like paper must make to remind you it's paper. We added it to our calendar. Back home, my brother cobbled it. He had been quiet for a day, because oil fields have their own weather. He said he had watched the meeting clip again in his motel room. He said he played it without sound and with the overhead light off, just the screen. He said when the card filled the corner and our mother's name appeared, he felt something old and wrong unclench in his chest. He thought, I should have been there. I said, you were. You were a square on a wall and a voice in a speaker and a signature on a plan. That counts. He swallowed. Thanks for running point, Cess. I said, we all ran. We just ran in our lanes. Late afternoon, a text arrived from my sister-in-law. A photograph, slightly staged, of grocery bags on my